Hey, what's up, everybody? Life's Edge by Carl Zimmer. Carl Zimmer is an award winning writer and science journalist. He's written over a dozen books covering topics such as viruses, evolution, and genetics. Life's Edge is Carl's most recent science journalism book. This book reads like a big National Geographic production. If you've been watching my videos, I can tell you that this book is like What is Life by Paul Nurse if it was written by Ed Yong. That's the kind of science journalism you're getting here, and if you've read any of Ed Yong's books, you know that that's quite a compliment. For a long time, we humans have asked the question, what is life? What must something do, or what properties must it have to be called alive? Giving an answer to this question isn't quite as simple as we, knowing what it feels like to be alive, might think. As of today, scientists can't quite agree on a common universal answer. The boundaries of the definition of life can be a bit fuzzy. Life's Edge states that it's often much easier to fall onto disciplinary definitions, so physicians, oceanographers, lawyers, and entomologists, etc., can each use a definition that suits their needs. Most scientists agree that in order to be alive, the thing in question must have some form of metabolism, be able to maintain homeostasis, have the ability to reproduce, and be subject to evolution. If you Google the definition of life, you'll get this: the condition that distinguishes animals and plants from inorganic matter, including the capacity for growth, reproduction, functional activity, and continual change preceding death. That seems like a pretty good definition, but there are cases that don't quite fit. Carl Zimmer writes about many different cases we've seen through the development of different branches of biology, which challenge conventional ideas about what is living, such as organisms like tardigrades and rotifers that can undergo cryptobiosis, a kind of dehydrated hibernation, just like the trisolarans in the Three Body Problem novels, or viruses who don't have their own form of metabolism and reproduce parasitically. Then there are man made organoids, which are essentially miniature self assembling brains. Could it be that life is not an objective thing, but an idea that we've come up with to describe what we feel a certain way about? One of the main themes in biology is complexity out of simplicity. With the definition of life being so unclear, what does that say about our discussion of what is and is not alive? Carl ends this book on perhaps one of the biggest questions that has ever been asked. Where did life come from? Or how did life get started? Was it alkaline vents, volcanic ponds? Was it somehow seeded from outer space or electrically zapped into being like Frankenstein? While we still don't have a definitive answer at this time, it does sound as though, and many scientists agree, that we may not be very far off from arriving at an answer. Some very interesting aspects of prebiotic chemistry are discussed in this book. Some scientists are discussing whether inorganic matter gave rise to lipids, which organize into liposomes, giving rise to RNA, which in turn may have evolved into DNA. Or did DNA arise from symbiotic partnerships with bacteria? While this book was pretty interesting, it was not a perfect book. It can feel a bit disorganized and lacks a solid kind of structure. Even the names of the chapters and the subsections will usually tell you nothing or very little about what you're going to be reading. The only way to go to a certain subject is to use the index, which the book does have, as well as a bibliography and endnotes. And the book is about the subject of the definition of life, but the author can veer off into tangents quite a bit. You'll be reading about a certain scientist and cover a lot that isn't really relevant to the topic before finding out why the author brought up that scientist. I think this type of approach would have worked better with a shorter book, but this book was almost 300 pages. This was one of those books that felt like it was written because the author decided he wanted to write another book. Not that the author had all this interesting knowledge and so decided to turn it into a book. That's where the journalism approach came in. But as far as science journalism, I do have to say that I thought Ed Yong did it better, especially with Zimmer going off topic so much. I did learn a lot of interesting new things in this book, though. In many biology books, Thomas Huxley is reduced to the title of Darwin's bulldog, but this book covers some more of the work that Huxley was involved in, even if not all of it turned out so great. Charles Darwin's grandfather, Erasmus Darwin, is also covered a little bit in this book. And this book came with an example of negative feedback loop besides the centrifugal steam governor, which is the example used in so many science books. This one used the invention of cruise control. It's a very nice and simple description of a negative feedback loop, like the ones we see in life forms. Also, in science, failures are a huge part of the advancing of our knowledge, and this book does a good job in addressing some of these failures. This book also provided a very nice look at evolution through the author's work with bacteria. The reader gets a good, brief overview of how it all works. Life's Edge is a pretty interesting book, and if you collect science books, you'll be glad to have this one on your shelf. So that's it for this one, guys. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. Have you guys read any of Carl Zimmer's books or any other books related to this topic? What do you think? Either way, if you made it through this whole video, you'll want to check out Life's Edge by Carl Zimmer.